Hello, I'm Alex Gill with On Demand Location, and we are here at Matsuricon 2013 with Lisle Wilkerson.
Hello, everybody.
How did you first get into the world of voice acting, Lisle?
Well, I started off in radio. I was in radio from the age of 19. And a lot of times when you're in radio, people hear your voice a lot, of course, on the airwaves. And so it's kind of a natural, really transition into voiceover acting. So that's how I got into it. Of course, my experience was not as much here, but it was more in Japan. So yes, it's been a wonderful journey so far.
How has the state of the industry changed since you first got involved in it?
Oh, I mean, the entertainment industry itself has just completely changed. It's a very different animal nowadays. I mean, what with social media and with the internet being such a strong force in radio and in voice acting and in film and in TV, I think that it just in some ways it gives people more opportunities, which is what a lot of times we'll bring up at the voice acting panel. If you wanted to get into voice acting, you don't have to be in that said city. Like, you don't have to be in Los Angeles or in Dallas or in New York. You know, you can always do it from your home, telecommuting, or, because you can always email the files wherever it is. So, say for instance, I do a weekly radio report for Tokyo radio station, and with that, I do it by Skype. So we record by Skype every week, and so there's those wonderful things about it. Yeah, but
wonderful. Now, you've worked on Hello Kitty, and what was the experience like in working on a series that has had such a major impact all across the globe in all sorts of different markets?
Yeah, well, so first of all, I was a kid when the original Hello Kitty came out. Like, this is in the 70s. So I am a huge Hello Kitty fan. So for me, it was very, it was just a wonderful experience, The only thing is with my Hello Kitty, the character I did was Batsmaru, which is, her naughty little friend that's always getting into problems and trouble. And when I did that, it was a big project that Sanrio did, the parent company, and it was in English and Japanese, the voice work. So it was probably one of the hardest voiceover experiences I've ever had, just because the voice was also it was like, "Hi, Minna, that's about it," kind of like that. It was like a very, I had a very guttural kind of voice, and I had to do it in English and Japanese. So, but yeah, it was wonderful to be a part of such an amazing part of pop culture, so.
Now, you've lived in Japan for 35 years.
Correct. Even though I'm 21.
Time travel.
Time travel.
What were some of the cultural adjustments that you've had to go through from living in the United States to living in Japan?
Well, I moved there when I was 5. So when you're that young, and you're just kind of going along with what your parents do. It wasn't like when we were getting ready to move to Japan, my parents said, "We're going to be moving to a place called Japan. It's a different country. You're 5. What do you know?" Especially back then. And I was like, "Okay, what's Japan?" And at that time, one of my favorite board games was Candyland. So my parents were like, "Well, Japan is probably like Candyland." So we arrived in the airport, and I'm like, "Where's the candy? This isn't Candyland," But it was, culturally, growing up in a different culture has just been an amazing experience for me. And I think I've had more culture shock moments moving back here to the States, because not knowing where one culture begins and one culture, ends. And so it's, I feel very bicultural in that sense. So yeah, I'm still having culture shock moments all the time.
From my understanding, Japan is very colorful and vibrant in a lot of the major urban areas because of the concept of Shinto, of animism in things that are ordinarily lifeless. So, there are a lot of, colors and vibrance in these cities that, kind of make it, colorful and vibrant like Candyland in ways. Could you tell us about some of your work over in Japan?
I do a lot of interpreting because I speak Japanese, and as I mentioned, I do radio. I also do a lot of TV work as well, so I'll do interpreting for various artists that are over in Japan, or I'll do reporting. So I was a resident reporter for NHK. I don't know if you guys know. It's like the PBS equivalent in Japan. Yeah. So I was one of their reporters for a popular show of theirs. And I mean, I've done anything and everything. I do. I work with a lot of, like I do interpreting and voiceover work with video games and commercials. And I mean, you name it, I've probably done it.
Now, we don't get a chance to ask voice actors boxing questions. Is this a good way to keep in shape? Does it build your stamina for your roles? How does it benefit you physically?
I have always been kind of fascinated with boxing just because it's really an all-body sport, like your core, of course your upper body, but then you also have to be very much, it's a very intense sport. And for me, I grew up with volleyball, so I played volleyball for probably about 12 years and still play it every once in a while. But I got into boxing when I was in Japan, and of course I play a lot of fighting game characters like Nina Williams, and so I'm hoping to actually incorporate that into a panel where I just recently started boxing again, and so I would like to eventually cosplay in one of her costumes, and then maybe do like a interactive Fighting with Nina panel where I somehow, without anyone getting hurt, where I get to kick people's ass. Yeah. So, but I love boxing. It's great because it's not just for physically, also mentally. It's it keeps you very aware, and you're just constantly like using your mind all the time. And so to me, it's like a real high. Like I love it. Yeah.
All right. Now, speaking of fighting and fighting games, do you act out all of those motions, and do you pick up any of that from your boxing?
You mean when I'm doing the voice acting work, or
maybe like before you go into the booth, do you like kind of position yourself as that character?
So and this is actually a question that sometimes we get asked on our voice acting panel. Like, when you go into character, do you go into character? Yeah. And with me, I have what I call my fighting girl stance, which is where I'm my legs are kind of out a little bit, so a little bit by a little bit more than shoulder width, I guess. And it's kind of an empowerment pose for me, like stance. And so usually when I'm doing like a Nina Williams or a Sarah Bryan or a Christy Montiero, I'll be in that pose, and I'll sometimes use some kind of physical action, but it depends on what I'm doing. Like with a lot of the battle cries or, stuff like that where you're like, ah! Then I do that kind of stuff. So yeah, I do sometimes too.
Things to keep in mind when I play my next round of Virtua Fighter. All right. Are there any way fans can keep up with you online?
Yes, I'm on Facebook under Lisle Weapon, I believe, or Lisle Wilkerson. You can find me under my name. I'm also on Twitter and on Foursquare. And I have a website, which is lisleweapon.com. And I also have a blog, which I haven't been doing very good at keeping up with, but Memoirs of a 6 Feet Blonde Geisha. And I'm planning on doing a podcast as well. So I haven't actually started that yet, but I'll probably be doing that later this fall.
All right, sounds great. Do you have any final words you'd like to get to the audience watching?
Yes. Follow your heart. That's what I always tell people. I know a lot of people that come to cons are very much about manga, and they want to be a illustrator, or they want to be a graphic designer, they want to work with video games or what have you. And with the entertainment business, it's a tough fight, and it's very, very hard to get into. However, if this is what you really want to do, and you're willing to sacrifice, and there's definitely going to be sacrifice at some point, A lot of times, more than not, you have to sacrifice a lot, but follow your heart. If you're passionate about it, do it and go all out. It's not something that you just dabble in. It's something that you either do or you don't. So commit and then go for it.
Sounds great. Lisle Wilkerson, thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimasu.